May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord. The Gospel of Mark is the shortest of the Gospels. It has only 16 chapters. And the reading that was just read from that Gospel is right smack in the middle in chapter 8. And it's an important passage because there is a turning in the Gospel. It's a turning in the way Jesus is thinking. It's a turning in the direction he is now going to go. If you read the first 7 chapters, you'll read about Jesus calling his disciples, going to the synagogue to preach, forgiving someone his sins, disputing with the Pharisees over healing on the Sabbath, eating with sinners, or eating with unclean hands. He has one parable, the parable of the sower. There are other teachings that he gives in Mark. He talks about the death of John the Baptist and also sending out the disciples. But there's one more thing. And when you read these 7 chapters, it kind of hits you one after the other because there are miracles, one miracle following after another. When he goes to the synagogue in that first chapter and teaching them, there's a man who's filled with an evil spirit and starts shouting at Jesus. And he says, "Come out of him." He's exorcised. After the synagogue, they go to Simon's house where his mother-in-law is ill, and he takes her by the hand and raises her up, healed. Many that evening are brought to him sick. He heals them all. We read of a leper that comes to Jesus. He touches him and he heals him. There's another man, paralytic, who is brought by friends to the house where Jesus is teaching, but they can't get in. There's so many people, so they go on the roof and open up the roof and let this man down. And Jesus heals him. The disciples and Jesus are on the Sea of Galilee, and a storm comes up. Jesus is asleep in the stern of the boat, but water starts to pour in, and they call to him, "Lord, save us." And he stands up and says to the storm, "Be still." He meets another man with unclean spirits, and he has the spirits removed from that man and go into pigs, who subsequently run over a cliff and die. He raises the daughter of Jairus, who has died. A woman who was hemorrhaging for 12 years is healed. And then there's this great gathering of people who listen to Jesus, and now that it's getting time for supper, he feeds the 5,000, having only 5 loaves and 2 fish. Another time, the disciples are in their boat on the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus walks in the middle of the night to the boat. He heals the daughter of a Gentile woman. A deaf man is brought to him, and he heals him. And right before our gospel, a blind man is healed to see again. There's one miracle after another that Jesus does. And all of a sudden now we get to this change in direction. Jesus asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? And they say, well, some say you're a prophet, some say you're John the Baptist, returned from the dead, others say you're Elijah. And he says, well, who do you say I am? Now, Peter has seen everything that Jesus has done, you see. He's seen all these miracles. No one else is doing this. And he knows that the Messiah is going to reconstitute the kingdom of David, usually by getting together a large group from Israel. But Jesus wouldn't have to do that. He's seen what Jesus can do with miracle after miracle. He could stop the Romans right in their tracks. And so naturally he says, you're the Messiah. You're the one we've been waiting for 1,000 years. And Jesus says, don't tell anyone. And then comes the switch, you see. The Son of Man, referring to himself, the Son of Man must go up to Jerusalem, where he will be arrested, he'll be tortured, and he'll be crucified, and on the third day rise again. Well, Peter doesn't understand that at all, and he rebukes him. We don't know exactly what he says, but undoubtedly he says something like, the Messiah isn't supposed to die. The Messiah is to set up the kingdom of David. What are you talking about? And Jesus calls him Satan. Can you imagine his favorite disciple? Satan, get behind me. You're thinking like men and not like God. From here on, there is a switch. No longer is he going to do miracle after miracle. The hope was that these miracles would turn people to God. But it didn't have that effect. People just wanted more miracles. And he knew that even though he came to be part of humanity, by doing these miracles, he sees himself as being above everyone. He can do what he wants. But now he's going to make it so that he is in fact one with his fellow man. Every person is born, everyone will die. And so he tells his disciples, I am going to be one with all of you, and I also will die. He wants to be able to show people God's love. When I first, when I first came to St. John's, we were having a council meeting, and there was a man there, Billy Fehrenbach, and he asked, would it be possible to start an AA group here? And we talked about it, and he said, yes, that'd be great. Have an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And so we've had AA meetings here ever since. And in fact, today we have 2 groups that are meeting every week. They do a wonderful job with people who are suffering from alcoholism. And I've referred many people to them. I've had people come who are alcoholics, and they want to talk with me, and I say, no, it's better if you go to the meeting. I don't have the training that you need. Plus, you see, I don't understand it. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have that disease. It's better if they can talk to someone who knows what's going on. And that person, be it their sponsor or someone else, can say, you're just kidding yourself. You can't do that. They can talk turkey with that person, and the person will absorb it because they know they're talking to someone who's been through it. I haven't been through what they've been through. But they can talk to someone who is one with them, who knows, who understands. That's what Jesus is doing. I don't know how many of you know the name Father Damien. Father Damien was a Belgian priest. His older brother, was also a priest, and he applied to serve in Hawaii. But at the last minute, he became severely ill, and his brother Damien asked if he could go to Hawaii in his stead. Hawaii had quite a few problems. It was in 1866 that the Hawaiian government established a leper colony on the island of Molokai, on a peninsula there. And everyone in Hawaii who came down with leprosy was sent to Molokai. And there they lived like cattle with a disease. Life on the island was a life of hopelessness. The people suffering from this disease saw only one thing: death in front of them. And so morality didn't matter. Those who were strongest took advantage of those who were weakest. It was into this society that Damien wanted to go and work with the people. He spent 9 years trying to convince the authorities that he should be allowed to go to Molokai and minister to these people. By the time he arrived, things had gotten so bad that the men and the women there didn't even feel like they were human. They believed they weren't worthy of love. And so Father Damien began to give the lepers all that he had. He walked people who had died and were just on the ground with a great stench. And he realized in order for people to have any sense of meaning for themselves, they have to treat their dead with respect. And so he established a cemetery and rituals for burying those who had died. One time when he spoke of the lepers, he spoke about them as his sons and his daughters. His superiors had warned him, don't touch the lepers. But that didn't stop him. He touched these people with leprosy. He hugged them, he kissed them. He took his thumb and he blessed them on the forehead. He reached out to them with all the love that he could muster. He bathed their wounds and he touched them because he knew in order to reach them spiritually, he had to reach them physically. And one day when Father Damien had filled a bucket full of hot water to wash his feet, he put his feet in the bucket and he had no feeling. And he realized that he too had come down with leprosy. And so when he next addressed the colony, he said, "We lepers." He was one of them. He who showed this great love to them had become one of them. And they were united then at a deeper level than they could possibly have imagined. Jesus wants to unite himself with us. And he's going to do this through his suffering and death. And so chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 10, has Jesus speak several times now about going up to Jerusalem. He only does one miracle in these 3 chapters, and that's right at the end, and that's another blind man. And the text around it says it's difficult to believe what Jesus is doing, just as it's hard for a blind man to see. In chapter 11, he goes into Jerusalem. He's there 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 5 chapters are devoted to his last week of life. It's as if everything is exploded. We see things happening hour by hour. This is where Mark wants us to concentrate on his crucifixion and death. It is here where he becomes united truly with us. A human being who lives and who dies. But it's in chapter 16 that we read of the resurrection. God vindicated him. Everything he had said, everything he had done in the past was true. And God said so by raising him. The Pharisees may have had a conflict with him, but it didn't matter. Jesus was the one who was God's Son, who spoke the truth. And so we are united with this one now, who has come to be one of us. And as he was raised from the dead, vindicated, so the promise is for you, for me, for all, that we too, as we look to him, as we trust him, we too will also be raised to be with him forever. Amen. The peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Our next hymn is 385. Sorry, 335.